It was just over 2 years ago, the first time I ever went camping. My name is Jake, and back then, I had zero experience. No survival skills, no knowledge of the outdoors, just a stubborn idea that the only way to learn was to throw myself into it. I found a campground about 2 hours from the city. Not too crowded, but not isolated either. The perfect mix for someone like me who wanted the thrill of the woods without complete loneliness. I arrived at the trailhead at noon and hiked in, backpack heavy, nerves buzzing with every step. By the time I reached the campground, I was sore but relieved. There were a few benches, old grills, and small paths leading to tucked-away campsites. Some were already filled with other campers. I set up my tent at one of these smaller spots. The air smelled like pine and faint smoke from the central fire pits. I could hear laughter and clinking bottles from the group gathered near the grills, but I stayed back. I wasn't exactly the social type. Then, one of them came over. His name was TJ, mid to late 20s, casual, easy smile. He invited me to join them. Against my shy instincts, I went. They seemed friendly, normal. For an hour we shared stories, talked about the woods, and it felt safe. By sunset, people drifted off. I headed back to my tent, ready to rest. But TJ followed. His voice carried an odd enthusiasm when he asked if I'd heard about a hidden lake nearby. A secret spot, he said. Beautiful, quiet, untouched. He was planning to go, and he wanted me to come with him. And despite the small twist in my gut warning me otherwise, I agreed. We left the safety of the campground. The path TJ led me on was no real trail at all, just a faint footpath twisting into the trees. Branches hung low, scratching against my jacket, the fading sunlight dripping through in thin streaks. He said it was a 10-minute walk. But after 10 minutes, there was no lake. The man who had been talkative and full of charm earlier was suddenly different. Quiet. Curt. His words dropped to one-syllable answers. Every few steps, he glanced at the sinking sun. I realized then, he wasn't making sure we had light left. He was waiting for the dark. The forest grew still, unnaturally still. Not even the sound of birds. Just the crunch of our boots and my pulse hammering in my ears. After 20 minutes, panic began crawling under my skin. I slowed, letting space grow between us. And then, I ran. I spun back toward camp, heart racing, feet tearing over roots and dirt. Behind me, his voice called out, friendly at first. Hey, wait up. Don't worry, it's close. But then, the tone shifted. Sharp. Angry. His voice cracked into shouts as I heard him sprinting after me. The chase blurred into terror. Branches whipped my arms, shadows rushed past, his footsteps pounding closer. For nearly a full minute he was right behind me, his ragged breaths cutting through the dark. Then, metal struck wood. A metallic thump rang out just behind me. I dared to glance back. A knife spun off a tree trunk, clattering to the ground. He had thrown it at me. That was his last attempt. Because when I pushed harder, stumbling back through the woods, the sound of his footsteps began to fade. His shouts grew distant. And finally, silence. Somehow, I made it back. Breathless, wild-eyed, I stumbled into the glow of the campground fires. The others stared as I gasped out my story. Someone called the police. But when they searched, there was no sign of TJ. And the worst part. They told me he'd been with them the whole time earlier. Laughing. Drinking. Pretending. He never had a tent. Never had gear. He was never really camping. I never saw him again. The police couldn't find him, not even a trace of where he went. It was as if he vanished into the woods. But I know what I felt. He wasn't some harmless stranger. He was hunting me. Waiting for the right time, the right place, when nobody would hear me scream. Sometimes, I still think about that moment, the metallic thud of the knife, the sound of footsteps closing in, the way the forest swallowed his voice. The campground that once felt safe now feels cursed in my memory. I don't camp anymore. I can't. Not after that night. Because if I had trusted him for just 10 more minutes, I might never have come back. I spent a couple of weeks in Montana last year, traveling with nothing but my truck and the small camper attached to it. Most nights I parked on public land or quiet campgrounds, far away from people. It was my last stretch of the trip, and I had planned to head home, but fate delayed me. My truck gave me trouble that day, chewing up the hours as I worked under the fading light to get it running again. By the time it finally roared back to life, the sun was bleeding into the horizon. I grabbed a coffee from a lonely gas station and told myself I'd drive 2 more hours before stopping for the night. The road was empty, swallowed by trees, with the last orange streaks of daylight vanishing in my mirrors. Using an app, I found a campsite marked as public land. The turn was nothing more than a narrow dirt path cutting into the woods. I followed it a quarter mile until it opened into a small grassy circle, ringed on all sides by tall, black pines. No campers. No lights. Just me and the forest. I parked facing the exit, climbed into the camper, and stretched out on the small bed. It was close to midnight. Exhaustion pulled me towards sleep almost instantly, until a sudden beam of light pierced the thin edge of my window cover. Headlights. Another vehicle was slowly crawling down the path. I sat up, lifting the privacy screen just enough to peek. An old pickup, rust clinging to its bumper, crept forward until it stopped directly at the end of the path. Its headlights glared into my camper, blinding me. They didn't turn around. They didn't leave. They just sat there, blocking the only exit. A cold heaviness pressed into my chest. After several minutes of them idling, I knew this wasn't innocent. I started folding my bedding, preparing to leave, but then one of their doors opened. The headlights snapped off, plunging the clearing into darkness. 2 men stepped out. I couldn't see their faces, only their outlines, and the shapes of objects in their hands. Tools. Metal. Something heavy. Their footsteps crunched softly as they circled my truck, trying to stay quiet. Then, a low voice broke the silence. "Hey, can you help us? We just need some directions. Open up." My heart thudded so loud I was sure they could hear it. Their voices slurred, drunk or worse. One shadow lingered near the camper door, scraping something sharp along the surface, testing the lock. Another figure pressed close to the window, gripping what looked like a crowbar. I braced my legs against the door, whispering to myself not to panic. Then, a gunshot ripped through the woods. The blast echoed, shattering the night. The 2 men froze. For one chilling second, none of us moved. Then they bolted, sprinting for their truck. The engine coughed, tires spit dirt, and within half a minute, they were gone. I stayed frozen, waiting for the crunch of leaves or another set of footsteps. But the forest was silent again, except for my own ragged breathing. When I finally forced myself to move, I jumped from the camper into my truck, hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Headlights swept across the trees as I sped down the dirt path and back to the empty highway. I didn't stop until I found a busy truck stop nearly an hour later. What happened back there still doesn't make sense. Maybe a hunter was camping nearby. Maybe someone had seen those men approach and decided to scare them off. Whatever the truth, I know one thing: if that gunshot hadn't come when it did, I wouldn't be here telling this story. That forest clearing in Montana still lingers in my memory, dark, silent, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the person who pulled that trigger was really saving me, or warning me. I was deep in Washington state, far from any familiar road. For days I had been backpacking through the national parks, lost in the crisp bite of autumn air. The forest stretched endlessly, painted in orange and gold, but stripped of warmth. I hadn't crossed a single soul for almost 2 days, just the crunch of my boots against the soil and the hiss of wind through the pines. That morning, I brewed a bitter coffee over my tiny pocket stove. The smell drifted into the cold air, the only comfort I had before setting off. My next camp was 6 miles away, 6 long miles across jagged mountain paths that twisted like veins through the wilderness. Hours into the hike, the silence broke. Footsteps. Steady, deliberate, coming from ahead. I froze, scanning the narrow trail. A man appeared, heading the opposite direction. Relief flickered for a second. I wasn't alone after all. I smiled, gave him a quick nod. But my relief died as soon as my eyes took him in. He carried nothing. No backpack, no water, not even a jacket thick enough for the cold. Just a long-sleeved shirt and worn-out pants. He walked as if he belonged there, but something about him didn't. When he passed, I turned my head instinctively to look back. So did he. Our eyes locked for a heartbeat. I quickly looked away, pretending nothing was wrong. Still, unease burrowed into my chest. Why would anyone wander this deep into the forest without supplies? I convinced myself maybe he had a nearby campsite, but I knew there were none within miles. By the time I reached my camp, exhaustion dragged me down. The spot wasn't what I imagined. Thick trees blocked the view, turning the mountain top into a prison of shadows. Still, I pitched my tent, sat in silence, and watched the last streaks of sunlight bleed away. That's when I heard it. A shuffle of feet on dirt. I turned. And my stomach turned with me. It was him. The same man stood only a few yards away. No gear, no bag, no tent, just him, staring into the trees like he didn't even notice me. But I knew he did. He must have turned around the moment we crossed paths. He had followed me here. I sat frozen, pretending to focus on the fading light. My mind raced. Who is he? Why is he here? Nothing about this made sense. Minutes dragged into half an hour. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there in the dirt like a shadow that refused to fade. Every instinct screamed at me, leave. Now. I forced my body to move, breaking the quiet with the sound of my tent collapsing. The poles rattled as I packed quickly, glancing up only to find his eyes locked on mine. Cold, unwavering, unblinking. The second I strapped my pack, he rose. And then, he followed. His footsteps trailed mine, slow but steady. The forest around me seemed to close in, trees towering like dark pillars, branches scraping overhead. My breathing quickened as I gripped the small knife I kept in my pocket. I walked faster. So did he. I could hear his breath now, ragged but close enough to make my skin crawl. Finally, I made a choice. I darted off the trail and into the thick woods. Branches whipped against my arms, the ground soft and uneven beneath my boots. Darkness swallowed everything. I pressed myself behind a tree, my heart beat thunderous in my ears. Moments later, his figure appeared on the path. He stopped. I held my breath. Then, he turned his head, scanning the trees. Like he knew. Like he could feel me watching. And then, he started calling out. His voice was disturbingly cheerful, words stretched in a false friendliness. "Hey, you out there? You lost?" The tone sent shivers crawling down my spine. It wasn't concern. It was bait. For 2 long minutes, he kept calling. His voice echoed through the trees, bouncing in unnatural ways, until suddenly, he stopped. I expected him to retreat back toward camp. Instead, he stepped off the trail and walked into the forest. Not toward me, but deeper, across to the opposite side. His shadow dissolved into the blackness until only silence remained. I didn't move. Not for 10 minutes. Not for 20. I stayed crouched in the cold dirt, my hands trembling around the knife. An hour later, I finally forced myself to run. Past branches, past shadows, until I found the strength to skip the next camp entirely and push toward town. When I finally reached the ranger station, my report was taken, but no answers came. No follow-up. No closure. And I'm left with one question that never stops echoing in my mind. What did he want with me? I never saw him again. No missing person report matched his face, no hiker confessed to wandering without supplies. He was a ghost on that mountain, whether flesh and blood or something far worse. Even now, when I think back to the way his footsteps echoed behind me, I can still feel the chill pressing against my spine. The forest that once felt alive and peaceful now carries a darker weight. Every rustle in the leaves, every crack of a twig, reminds me of that night. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I imagine him still out there. Waiting. Watching. Somewhere in the endless woods of Washington. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.